The most memorable memory of Diane Horn's childhood life was when her cousin would come over to play with her. They would hop on their bicycles and take off on an adventure. Most of the time, they would end up at the Rock Creek Bridge a few miles from her house, but sometimes they would ride their bicycles all the way to Cypher and back to Rock Creek. When they would get there, back to the creek, they would skip rocks or wade in the creek or just hide under the bridge. This was how most children in the 50s and 60s would spend their time playing and passing time away. In those days, no one had to worry about their kids, who they were playing with, or where they were at. You hardly ever heard of a child being kidnapped. The children in the 50s and the 60s had a lifestyle that was laid back and more conservative. In these times, you can't even leave your kids alone in the front yard for a few minutes, let alone be gone all day. To understand the culture Diane was raised in and the changes her culture went through, I will review a few of those changes. In the 50s, some changes took place that would affect Diane. According to the Internet article, The American Cultural History, 1950-59, written by B. Bradley in 1998, from kclibrary.lonestar.edu, education had a drastic change in the form of segregation. American culture, some interesting facts also found in the Internet article, The American Cultural History, 1950-59, is in 1954, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas was not equal. In 56, Autherine Lucy was the first black female to be enrolled at the University of Alabama. And the final act ushering in segregation in 1957 was Elizabeth Egbert, the first female black to enter Little Rock Central High School. Another change that took place in the 50s was to entertainment. Once again in the Internet article, The American Cultural History, 1950-59, entertainment in the 50s consisted of television with increased numbers of young and adult Americans bringing in TV sets to their home, watching shows like The Ed Sullivan Show, I Love Lucy, and Lassie. Music also had changes to it in the form of rock and roll. Diane's favorite rock and roll singer was Elvis Presley. Another form of entertainment was the theater. In fact, in the Internet article, The American Cultural History of 1950-59, says that the same movies that were popular in the 40s were also popular in the 50s. The only thing that didn't change for Diane in the 50s was the type of educational material that was found in classrooms. They used pencils to write with, notebooks to write on, their lessons on, textbooks to study from, and encyclopedias for researching subjects. In relation to her childhood years, we can see the changes to her culture in her teen years. The Internet article, American Cultural History, 1960-1969, written by Goodwin and Bradley in 1999 from kclibrary.lonestar.edu, says the 60s were the age of the youth. Many of our youth in this decade faced peer pressure into porn. The first form of peer pressure was drugs. Diane told me that there was some drugs in the school, but not likely or not that common in this area. The second form of peer pressure is sex. I was told by Diane that this was the main peer pressure for teens to deal with in the area we live in. Another major change that was made in this decade was to music. Also found in the Internet article, The American Cultural History, 1960-1969, says the music was changed due in part by the drug scene. This is how acid rock was born. The Internet article, The American Cultural History, 1960-1969, tells us the music festival of the century took place in Woodstock with over 40,000 in attendance. The hangout joints for the teens in this decade ranged from the fast food restaurants such as the Sugar Shack, where Diane met her husband, Harry, to soda shops. In addition to the changes in the childhood and her teen years, there was more to come. In Diane Horn's young adult life, she began a family right out of high school by marrying Perry Horn in 1969 at the age of 18. 1 year later, they welcomed their first and only child into their family. In her young adulthood, she said that she really didn't have any political beliefs. However, others her age did. In the Internet article, The Counterculture of the 1960s, published by John Wiley and Sons from CliffNotes.com, young adults were drawn to left-wing politics. These young adults, according to the Internet article in 1960s Lifestyle and Social Trends Overview, published by American Decades in 2001 from Encyclopedia.com, organized protests against the military-industrial complex in the Vietnam War. In conclusion, the culture of the 50s and 60s went through many changes. Some of these changes directly affected Diane Horn while she was growing up. There are still changes taking place today to her culture and ours. For instance, the introduction of computers. The first computer Diane remembers seeing and using was a monster. Now they are so small. Now they are as small as a textbook. Some other technological changes that took place will be in the form of radio. You could hear music through the transistor radios in the 50s and 60s, but now we have it in the form of XM satellite radio. I could go on and on about all the changes that took place in Diane's life, but that could take a while. So I will leave it at this. Our society is seeing changes all the time to our culture. Some are better and some are not. Just embrace life and live it to the fullest like Diane has.